I used to believe that hard work was enough, that talent would eventually shine through the cracks of corporate hierarchies. 5 years at Archer & Mills had taught me otherwise, but I was still clinging to hope like a drowning man to driftwood. Our agency once ruled Chicago's advertising scene. Now we were hemorrhaging clients and struggling to keep the lights on. The Parker Motors account was our last lifeline, a prestigious automotive brand that represented 40% of our remaining revenue. The campaign we'd pitched them 3 months ago was tanking, and their marketing director had given us 2 weeks to turn things around or they'd walk. The team assigned to the rescue mission didn't include me, despite my repeated requests to join. I watched from my cramped cubicle as the A-team held emergency meetings in the glass conference room. My direct supervisor, Nathan, had always made it clear that my ideas weren't Archer & Mills material, whatever that meant. I was good enough to execute other people's concepts, but apparently not to generate my own. After everyone left for the day, I stayed behind. The office quieted except for the hum of the air conditioning and the occasional ping of the elevator. I slipped into the conference room and studied the boards they'd left up. Consumer metrics, focus group results, competitor analyses. The approach they were taking was painfully conventional, a desperate attempt to play it safe when what Parker needed was something revolutionary. I pulled out my laptop and began working on an alternative concept. While the official team was pushing generic luxury messaging, I saw something different in the data. Parker's target demographic wasn't responding to status symbols anymore. They wanted authenticity, connection, a story about resilience. I worked until 3 a.m. fueled by vending machine coffee and determination, developing a campaign that spoke to how people actually felt about their cars in 2025, not as status symbols, but as witnesses to life's pivotal moments. The next morning, bleary-eyed but confident, I approached Nathan before the team meeting. I know I'm not on the Parker team, but I've been looking at the data, and I think I have an angle that might work. Nathan glanced at the folder in my hand with thinly veiled irritation. Tom, we've got this covered. The executive team is reviewing our approach today. Just take a look. What's the harm? I slid the folder across his desk. He sighed dramatically but opened it. I watched his expression change as he flipped through the pages, from annoyed to intrigued, to something that looked almost like fear. Where did you get this research? He asked, his voice suddenly tight. I did it myself, nights, weekends. I cross-referenced the data we already had with some public sentiment analysis. He closed the folder. I'll review it and get back to you. He never did. For a week, I sent follow-up emails that went unanswered. I cornered him in the break room once, only to be told they were incorporating elements of my thinking into the existing framework. I knew what that meant. They'd cherry-pick my ideas without giving me credit. It had happened before, but never with something this important. The following Monday, I arrived early and saw the executive team gathered in the conference room. Through the glass, I could make out my campaign boards, my designs, my copy, my strategy, being presented by Nathan. He was gesturing confidently, pointing to my concepts as if they'd sprung fully formed from his mind. The executives were nodding, actually smiling for the first time in months. I stood frozen by the coffee machine, a strange calm settling over me. This should have been my moment. Instead, I was watching it happen from the outside, like pressing my face against a restaurant window to glimpse a meal I couldn't afford. In that moment, something shifted inside me, a quiet determination replacing the desperate need for approval that had driven me for years. I returned to my desk and began making plans. Not for revenge, but for something far more powerful, my independence. When Parker Motors decided to continue with us, the agency erupted in celebration. The executive floor ordered champagne by the case. Even the finance department emerged from their windowless corner to join the festivities. I stood among my colleagues, raising my plastic cup in a toast that tasted like betrayal. To Nathan and his brilliant pivot, called out Diane, our CEO, her voice carrying over the crowd. This is exactly the kind of innovative thinking that built Archer & Mills. Nathan accepted the praise with practiced humility, his hand on his heart as if the accolades were almost too much to bear. When I saw the initial results tanking, I knew we needed a complete paradigm shift, he explained to the enthralled crowd. Sometimes you have to throw away the rule book. I felt sick. The paradigm shift he described so eloquently had come from the folder I'd handed him 2 weeks ago. Every insight, every strategic point, even some of the exact phrasing, all mine. Yet there I stood, anonymous in the crowd, watching someone else bask in recognition that should have been shared at the very least. My colleague Zoe nudged me, with her elbow. "You okay? You look like you're about to pass out." "I'm fine," I lied, forcing a smile. "Just surprised the campaign worked so well." "I'm not," she whispered. "Not after seeing you work on it for weeks. Those late nights finally paid off, huh?" I stared at her, momentarily speechless. "You knew? The walls of your cubicle aren't exactly soundproof. I heard you rehearsing that pitch a dozen times." She raised an eyebrow. "Though I notice you're not up there with Nathan taking a bow." Before I could respond, Marcus, the creative director, clinked his glass for attention. "This calls for more than just a toast. Nathan, in recognition of this outstanding work, we're offering you the position of Senior Strategy Director, effective immediately." The room erupted in applause again. My vision blurred at the edges. Senior Strategy Director. The position I'd been working toward for 3 years. The position I'd been told repeatedly I wasn't ready for. Nathan made his way through the crowd, accepting handshakes and backslaps. When he reached me, he had the audacity to wink. "Thanks for that research, Tom. Couldn't have done it without you." He said it quietly, just between us, making it clear no public acknowledgement would be forthcoming. "You mean you couldn't have done it at all?" I replied, matching his hushed tone. His smile faltered for just a moment. "Team effort, right? That's how it works here. Except it wasn't a team. It was my work, my concept, my campaign." Nathan's expression hardened. "Look, I gave your rough ideas structure and presented them properly. That's why they succeeded. You've never understood how to play the game." He leaned closer. "Be careful, Tom. You're good at execution, but you're not leadership material. Know your place." Those words, "not leadership material," hit me like a physical blow. I'd heard variations of that sentiment my entire career, and until that moment I'd almost believed it. I watched Nathan walk away, back to his admirers, wearing my ideas like a tailored suit. Later that evening, long after the celebration had died down, I sat alone in the darkened office. On my screen was the original presentation I'd created, the one Nathan had modified just enough to claim as his own. I compared it side by side with what had been presented to Parker Motors. The evidence of theft was clear, but what good would it do me now? The client was satisfied, the agency was celebrating, and Nathan had his promotion. My phone buzzed with a text from my sister. "How was the big presentation? Did they love your idea?" I stared at her message, unsure how to respond. The truth felt too raw, too humiliating. But as I sat there, something inside me crystallized, a resolve that had been forming since I watched Nathan present my work. I wasn't angry anymore. I was clear. I texted back, "They loved it, but I think it's time for me to make a change." Then I opened my laptop and began typing my resignation letter. Not a heated, emotional exit that would only reinforce their perception of me. Instead, I crafted something professional and direct. I would give 2 weeks' notice, transition my projects cleanly, and leave with my reputation intact. But I wouldn't be going to another agency. The Parker campaign had proven I had what it took to succeed. If Archer and Mills couldn't see my value, I would build something where that value was undeniable. I would create my own agency, one where credit went where it was due, where good ideas weren't buried under hierarchy and politics. As I finalized the letter, a strange sense of peace washed over me. For years, I'd tried to fit into someone else's vision of success. Now I would define success on my own terms. Handing in my resignation felt like jumping off a cliff. Diane's face registered genuine shock when I placed the letter on her desk, not because she particularly valued me, but because people simply didn't leave Archer and Mills. Despite our recent struggles, the agency still carried enough prestige to make departure seem like career suicide. "Is this about compensation?" she asked, barely skimming the letter. "Because We can discuss adjustments during your annual review next month. It's not about money, I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. I need to pursue opportunities that better align with my professional goals. Diane removed her glasses, studying me with new interest. This is about Nathan's promotion, isn't it? Look, Tom, you're an essential part of the execution team, but Nathan has the vision we need right now. I bit back the words that threatened to spill out, that the vision she praised was actually mine. Instead, I simply said, I wish Nathan and the agency continued success. Word spread quickly. By lunchtime, colleagues I barely spoke to were stopping by my cubicle, curious about my decision. Some seemed genuinely concerned, others barely concealed their schadenfreude. Leaving a prestigious agency voluntarily was either brave or stupid, and opinion was divided on which category I fell into. Nathan avoided me entirely until my final day. He appeared at my desk as I was packing my few personal items, his expression a careful mix of concern and superiority. I heard you're going solo, he said, leaning against my cubicle wall. Brave move in this economy. I continued packing. Sometimes you have to throw away the rulebook, right? He flinched at hearing his own stolen words thrown back at him. Look, I know you think I did you wrong, but this is how the industry works. You put in your time, you pay your dues. You can't just skip steps. I'm not skipping steps, I replied. I'm taking a different staircase entirely. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. The boutique agency dream. Good luck with that. Most fold within a year. Clients want the security of established names. Clients want results, I countered, closing my box. And authentic creativity doesn't always come from the biggest names. Nathan's expression hardened. You know, I actually fought for you to get credit on the Parker campaign. The executives didn't even want to mention your contribution. He lowered his voice. This industry runs on relationships, Tom. Burning bridges isn't smart. The lie was so blatant, it almost made me laugh. Instead, I picked up my box and extended my hand. I'm not burning bridges, Nathan, I'm building my own. He shook my hand reluctantly, his palm damp. When reality hits, don't expect a spot waiting for you here. Walking out of the Archer and Mills office that final time, I felt a strange mixture of terror and liberation. The Chicago wind whipped around me as I stood on Michigan Avenue, the box of belongings under my arm suddenly seeming absurdly small, 5 years reduced to a few mementos and a dying plant. My apartment felt different that evening, less like a place I crashed between workdays, and more like the birthplace of something new. I cleared my kitchen table and spread out a blank notebook, then wrote Keystone Creative at the top of the first page. It was the name I'd been holding in my mind for years, through countless projects where my contributions remained invisible. Reality set in quickly. I had some savings, but not enough to lease an office or hire staff. I had a portfolio, but many of my best concepts had been attributed to others. I had confidence in my abilities, but no client base to speak of. The practical challenges were daunting. Late that night, I received an unexpected text from Zoe. Heard you left. Bold move. Parker's marketing team loved your concepts, by the way. Nathan's follow-up ideas aren't landing. Thought you should know. I stared at the message, a plan forming. Nathan might have stolen my past work, but he couldn't steal my relationship with the client, because we'd never had one. I'd never been allowed in those meetings, never permitted to present directly. As far as Parker Motors knew, I didn't exist. But what if I approached them not as a former Archer and Mills employee, but as the founder of Keystone Creative? Not to poach them, that would be unethical and legally problematic, but to introduce myself to their marketing team and establish a connection for the future. Nathan was right about one thing. This industry ran on relationships. I drafted an IND, email to Sarah Chen, Parker's marketing director, requesting a brief coffee meeting to introduce my new venture. It wasn't about immediate business, but planting seeds for the future. I hesitated before hitting send, questioning whether I was crossing a line. Then I remembered Nathan's words at the celebration. You've never understood how to play the game. Maybe he was right. Maybe I didn't understand the game because I was meant to create a new one with different rules, different values. I hit send and closed my laptop. Whether Sarah responded or not, I had taken my first real step. There was no turning back now, only moving forward into the uncertain terrain of independence. Sarah Chen responded to my email within hours, agreeing to meet for coffee the following week. I spent days preparing for what should have been a casual introduction, rehearsing my elevator pitch until the words lost all meaning. I needed to strike the perfect balance, confident but not arrogant, ambitious but not desperate. We met at a small cafe in the West Loop, away from the advertising district where we might bump into Archer and Mills people. Sarah arrived precisely, on time, dressed impeccably in a charcoal suit that exuded the same refined confidence as Parker Motors' brand identity. "So," she said after we'd exchanged pleasantries, "Keystone Creative. Tell me what makes you different from the dozens of boutique agencies that launch every year in Chicago." The directness of her question caught me off guard. I'd prepared for small talk, for gradual relationship building. Instead, she was cutting straight to the chase. "Transparency," I said, surprising myself with the answer. "I believe clients deserve to know exactly who's creating their campaigns, from concept to execution. No bait and switch where you meet the creative director during pitches but get handed off to juniors once you sign." Sarah studied me over her coffee cup. "That's a direct shot at the big agencies." "It's how I intend to operate," I replied. "Small dedicated teams with direct client access. No layers of account managers diluting communication." "And what experience do you bring to this new venture? Your email was vague about your background." This was the moment I'd been dreading. How to reference my work without claiming credit for campaigns that officially belonged to others. "I've spent 5 years at a major Chicago agency," I said carefully. "I've worked on automotive, tech, and consumer goods accounts. I believe in finding the human connection in every brand story." Sarah set down her cup. "You're being deliberately obtuse, Tom. I know you worked at Archer and Mills. Nathan mentioned a disgruntled employee had left recently." Her gaze sharpened. "What I want to know is what you actually did there." The mention of Nathan sent a surge of anxiety through me. Had he poisoned the well already? I took a deep breath, deciding in that moment that while I wouldn't badmouth my former employer, I wouldn't hide the truth either. "I contributed to the recent Parker Motors campaign," I said. "The concept focusing on cars as witnesses to life, moments rather than status symbols, that originated with me." Sarah didn't look surprised. I suspected as much. The follow-up concepts haven't matched the original insight. There's been a distinct, drop in quality. "I can't comment on their current work," I said diplomatically. "No, but I can." She pulled out her tablet and opened a document. "Here's the thing, Tom. We're launching a new electric crossover next quarter. Archer and Mills is pitching for it, but I'm not convinced they understand the market. I'd like to see what Keystone Creative would do with it." I stared at her, certain I'd misheard. "You want me to pitch against Archer and Mills? I don't even have a team yet. I don't need glossy presentations and focus group data. I need fresh, thinking from someone who understands our brand voice." She slid the tablet toward me, displaying specifications for the new vehicle. "Can you have something for me in 2 weeks?" My mind raced. This wasn't planting seeds for future business. This was an immediate opportunity that could establish Keystone overnight. It was also a massive undertaking for a one-person operation with no resources. "Yes," I heard myself say. "I can do that." Sarah nodded, seemingly satisfied. "Good. And Tom?" This conversation never happened. As far as Archer and Mills knows, we're still considering their pitch exclusively. I left the cafe in a daze, clutching the tablet with the vehicle specs. The opportunity was exhilarating, but Sarah's secrecy gave me pause. Was I being used as leverage to get better work from Archer and Mills? Was this a test of my integrity, or was she genuinely interested in what I could create? That evening, I called Zoe. "I need your help," I said when she answered. "Off the books. After hours. I can't pay much yet, but I'm in." She interrupted. Whatever it is, this place is suffocating without you. It might mean burning bridges, I warned her. Some bridges need burning, she replied. Besides, Nathan's been taking credit for my copy now too. Apparently I'm next in line for his idea harvesting. For the first time since leaving Archer and Mills, I smiled. I wasn't alone in this, and maybe, just maybe, Keystone Creative wasn't just a dream scribbled in a notebook anymore. Zoe and I transformed my apartment into a makeshift agency headquarters. My dining table disappeared under mood boards and market research, while my living room walls became plastered with competitor analyses and consumer insights. We worked evenings and weekends, fueled by takeout and determination. Parker's existing customer base skews older, Zoe said one night, analyzing the data Sarah had provided. But this crossover needs to appeal to millennials without alienating their core demographic. I nodded, studying the vehicle specifications. The competition is pushing the technology angle hard. Autonomous features, infotainment systems. But the research shows people are experiencing tech fatigue. They want simplicity, reliability. So we position it as technology that disappears, Zoe suggested. Innovation that serves without demanding attention. The concept started taking shape, a campaign centered on the idea of quiet revolution. While other electric vehicles announced themselves with futuristic designs and complicated interfaces, Parker's crossover would offer advanced technology that integrated seamlessly into life, becoming a reliable backdrop to the moments that actually mattered. 3 days before our deadline, Zoe received a text from a colleague still at Archer and Mills. Nathan's going ballistic, she read aloud. Apparently, Parker's marketing team wasn't impressed with their initial concepts. They've pulled everyone in for an emergency strategy session. My stomach nodded. Did they mention us? No, but Nathan's telling everyone that Parker's being unreasonable and that their expectations are contaminated by outside sources. I paced the length of my small apartment. He suspects something. Of course he does, Zoe said. Nathan's not stupid, just unoriginal. He knows he didn't deliver what Parker's expecting. The day before our presentation, we were putting final touches on the pitch when my phone rang. It was Marcus, the creative director from Archer and Mills. Tom, he said when I answered, his voice unnaturally casual. How's life on the outside? Starting your own shop, I hear? That's right, I replied cautiously. What can I do for you, Marcus? Actually, I thought I might help you. Word around town is you're pitching for Parker's new electric crossover. He paused, letting the implication sink in. That would put you in a difficult position, legally speaking. Your employment contract included a non-compete clause. My blood ran cold. I'm aware of my contractual obligations. Good. Then you're also aware that approaching Parker Motors within 6 months of your departure constitutes a breach. The agency would have no choice but to pursue remedies. The threat was clear, but something about it didn't add up. How exactly did you hear I was pitching to Parker? Chicago's a small town in our industry, Marcus replied smoothly. People talk. After hanging up, I called Sarah immediately. Did you tell Archer and Mills about our meeting? Of course not. She sounded genuinely surprised. Why? I explained Marcus's call. There was a long silence on the other end. Tom, she finally said, I need to be honest with you. After our coffee, I mentioned to my assistant that I'd met with you. She must have leaked it. I'm sorry. I didn't think it would get back to them so quickly. What does this mean for tomorrow? It means you show up as planned. Sarah's voice hardened. I'm tired of agencies that overpromise and underdeliver. If Archer and Mills wants to threaten litigation instead of creating better work, that tells me everything I need to know about their priorities. I hung up feeling both relieved and anxious. The presentation was still on, but now Archer and Mills knew about it. The stakes had just gotten higher, not just for winning the account, but for the very survival of Keystone Creative before it had even properly launched. That night, as Zoe finalized our presentation slides, I reviewed my employment contract. The non-compete clause was there, but it specifically prohibited working for direct competitors, other agencies, not clients. It restricted soliciting Archer and Mills clients, but it said nothing about responding to client-initiated inquiries. Sarah had reached out to me, not the other way around. Legally, we might be on solid ground. Professionally, however, I'd just made a powerful enemy. "You okay?" Zoe asked, noticing my distraction. "We can still back out." I thought about Nathan presenting my work as his own, about years of ideas dismissed until they came from someone else's mouth, about being told repeatedly to know my place. "No," I said, closing the contract. "We're seeing this through." The morning of the presentation, I dressed carefully in my best suit, the one I'd rarely had occasion to wear at Archer and Mills, where client meetings were reserved for senior staff. Zoe and I had rehearsed until every word, every slide transition, felt natural. Whatever happened today, we would at least know we'd given it everything. My phone buzzed with a text as we approached Parker Motors headquarters. "Don't look surprised when you get inside. Trust me. Sarah." I showed the message to Zoe, who looked as confused as I felt. "What does that mean?" "I guess we'll find out," I replied as we walked through the revolving doors, stepped into the elevator and rode up to our future, or our reckoning. Sarah's cryptic text made sense the moment we entered Parker Motors' conference room. Seated, at the far end of the table, looking like he'd swallowed something particularly unpleasant, was Nathan. Beside him sat Marcus and two account executives from Archer and Mills. Their presentation materials were already arranged neatly on the table. "Ah, Tom and Zoe," Sarah greeted us with professional warmth. "Thank you for coming. Please, set up your materials." She turned to address everyone. "As I explained to Archer and Mills this morning, we're considering multiple perspectives for this campaign. In the interest of making the best decision for Parker Motors, I've invited Keystone Creative to present their concept as well." Nathan's face was a mask of barely controlled fury. Marcus looked more calculated, studying us with narrowed eyes. The account executives just seemed confused. "Ms. Chen," Marcus began, "while we appreciate healthy competition, we have serious concerns about this arrangement. As we discussed earlier, there are potential legal complications regarding proprietary information." Sarah nodded. "Yes, you mentioned that. Which is why today's presentations will be evaluated not just on creativity, but on originality. We're looking for fresh concepts, not variations on existing work." The implication was clear. She suspected Archer and Mills of recycling ideas. The tension in the room ratcheted up several notches. We set up our presentation as the Archer and Mills team whispered urgently among themselves. Zoe's hand trembled slightly as she arranged our materials, but her face remained composed. I felt strangely calm, perhaps because the worst-case scenario I'd feared was already unfolding in plain sight. "We'll hear from Archer and Mills first," Sarah announced, followed by Keystone Creative. Nathan stood, buttoning his jacket with practiced ease. He launched into their presentation with the confidence of someone who had never been questioned. Their concept positioned the electric crossover as the future delivered, a high-tech showcase of automotive innovation targeted at early adopters. The visuals were slick, the production values high, but the concept felt generic, interchangeable, with any number of tech products. I watched Sarah and her team during the presentation. Their expressions remained professionally neutral, but I noticed the marketing director checking his watch twice and the product manager stifling a yawn. When Nathan concluded, the applause was polite, but tepid. Then it was our turn. I stood, feeling oddly like I was having an out-of-body experience. This was my first client presentation as the founder of my own agency, happening in front of the people who had repeatedly denied me such opportunities. "Thank you for including us today," I began, making eye contact with each Parker executive. "We believe your new crossover represents something more significant than just another electric vehicle. It's an opportunity to redefine what luxury means in 2025. I launched into our quiet revolution concept, explaining how it positioned Parker not as chasing technological trends but as curating technology to enhance human experiences. Our creative executions showed the vehicle as an elegant, unobtrusive presence in meaningful life moments, a witness to milestones rather than the star of the show. Today's consumers are overwhelmed by products that demand their attention, I explained. The true luxury is technology that serves without requiring constant engagement. Parker has always understood that luxury isn't about shouting, it's about quiet confidence. As I spoke, I saw Sarah nodding subtly. The product manager had stopped fidgeting and was leaning forward. Even Nathan's rigid expression had softened into something closer to curiosity. When we finished, the room fell silent for a moment before Sarah's team began asking questions. Thoughtful ones about implementation, timeline, budget. They directed these questions to us, not Archer and Mills. The direction of the meeting had unmistakably shifted. After both teams had answered all questions, Sarah thanked everyone for their time. "We'll be making our decision by the end of the week," she said. "Please leave your materials with us for review." In the elevator down to the lobby, Nathan finally spoke directly to me. "That was a clever stunt getting yourself invited to this presentation. But it won't work. They won't risk their relationship with an established agency for a two-person operation working out of an apartment." "Maybe," I replied, "but they've now seen what both operations can produce. That's all I wanted." "You know this isn't over," he said as we reached the ground floor. Marcus wasn't bluffing about legal action. I stepped out of the elevator. "Actually, I reviewed my contract. I didn't violate the non-compete. Parker approached me, not the other way around, but feel free to waste the agency's money on lawyers instead of creative talent. That strategy seems to be working well for you so far." Zoe and I walked out of the building in silence, both processing what had just happened. The adrenaline that had carried me through the presentation was fading, leaving me exhausted but strangely peaceful. "What now?" Zoe asked as we stood on the sidewalk. "Now we wait," I said. "And regardless of their decision, we start building Keystone for real. Today proved we can compete. That's something no one can take away from us." My phone buzzed with a new email. I opened it, then looked up at Zoe with a stunned expression. "What is it?" she asked. "It's from Sarah." I could barely get the words out. "She wants us to come back tomorrow morning. Not to discuss the crossover campaign, but to talk about handling Parker's entire youth market strategy." Zoe's eyes widened. "The whole youth division? That's 3 times the size of the crossover account." I nodded, still processing. "She says they've been considering splitting their business between agencies for months. They're keeping Archer and Mills for their established lines, but they want a fresh approach for reaching younger consumers." As the implications sank in, I felt a surge of vindication, not because we'd won at Nathan's expense, but because we'd won on our own merits. Keystone Creative wasn't just a reaction to injustice anymore. It was a legitimate business with its first major client. "We'll need to hire people," Zoe said, already thinking ahead. "Get a real office." "One step at a time," I replied. But my mind was already racing with possibilities. "First, let's go celebrate. We've earned it." As we walked away from Parker, Motors headquarters, I glanced back one last time. Through the glass lobby doors, I could see Nathan on his phone, gesturing frantically. I felt a momentary pang of sympathy for him. He was probably getting grilled by agency leadership, just as I had been dismissed by them countless times. But then I turned away. His story wasn't mine anymore. I had my own to write now.